I'm Amber Cameron, Women's Ministry Director at GBC, and I'm with Zak Stevens, the Associate Pastor, and we're here to have a discussion. Over a text that is found in Judges regarding Jephthah and what my Bible says, Jephthah and his tragic vow.
I mean, either way, I think it comes off as a tragic vow.
Yeah.
But there are different positions on this. And Amber and I happen to fall in two different categories on what exactly happens in this text. And so we wanted to come together and kind of share what those positions are and some of the basis for those positions. And one of the things I want to be really clear about up front is, one, this is not a close-handed, hill to die on kind of an issue. And two, I think both of us would attest to the fact that everything we're going to share are arguments that we've found in our research that scholars and historians have made, and we've been more convinced by different arguments. And so we just want to share what those are, what that actually looks like in the text. And that starts with, the big question is, did Jephthah actually kill his daughter? Mm-hmm. Or was his daughter offered up for service within the temple, or some sort of
for her life.
Priestly role for her life?
For her life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it starts with the vow itself.
Yeah.
Okay. And go ahead.
So in the vow, he says to the Lord, right before he goes in and fights the Ammonites, if you give them into my hand, and I'm able to come away from this, then whatever comes out of my house, I will dedicate to the Lord and offer it up in burnt offering. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of discussion on the whatever part. Mm-hmm. Did he mean whatever, or did he mean
whoever?
Whoever. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do agree that he meant whoever.
Yes.
For several different reasons. But it says whatever, but he meant whoever.
We agree on this. So that
we do agree on this. A lot of people agree on this.
He would have expected, most likely women, whether it be a servant or someone from the family, to come out and greet him.
He wasn't anticipating a chicken flapping out.
No.
Right. So because culturally that's what would happen. The women would come out, they would welcome the fighters home, and so
from your position, what would you how would you articulate, what was he saying when he said that?
Well, he was saying, whoever comes out of my house, I will dedicate it to you and offer it up in burnt offering, meaning I'm going to give it to you, and I'm going to give it to you in such completion that I'm offering it up in burnt offering.
And the background for that would be?
Well,
talk about the canonization,
right? Yeah. Well, because Judges demonstrates to us that at this time, everybody's doing what is right in their own eyes. And because so many of the pagan cultures around them did offer up human sacrifices, and especially before going into battle, this was a way that they would offer up human sacrifices to their pagan gods as a way to guarantee the outcome of a battle. So that's something that's happening around them. Mm-hmm. And so when we see that, and we know that, and we know that Israel is just constantly becoming more and more Canaanized, then that's one of the reasons why I lean towards that he did offer her up, which is horrible. Like, I don't enjoy thinking that.
So I would take this as a figurative statement. Mm-hmm. And there's some basis elsewhere in Scripture for people for people to do an offering and figurative language to be used. And so, for instance, in Numbers chapter 8, it actually says that those who are going to be priests are to be offered up as a wave offering. Now, a wave offering is something you did with first fruits. Mm-hmm. And so and a lot of them would end up being consumed completely by fire. Not necessarily. Some of the things were gifted to the priests, to the Levites. But you have people referred to on multiple occasions as wave offerings. And then and so when you have this idea of a burnt offering as it compares to the wave offering, a burnt offering is, in my mind, figuratively, if the same rules are allowed to apply, a burnt offering is far more all-consuming than a wave offering is. And so for him to say, I'm going to dedicate and offer up as a burnt offering, knowing that it would be a person, and again, keeping that kind of language in mind, that he is going to completely give over whichever person happens to first come out. So that would be the position on the language used there. And then, again, there's stuff in Leviticus 8 and in Exodus 29 that along the same lines.
Well, and
Go ahead.
And I think wouldn't just pop back as we're talking about different things that we see in Scripture. What we see in Judges, though, is we do kind of see this downward, like this decline that constantly happens, and where Jephthah falls in line is getting worse.
It's actually one of our disagreements, though, because
I know, because we have Samson.
Because I personally think that yes, you have a downward spiral, but this drops far lower than where it is in the actual narrative of the book of Judges. I think this would, if it were an actual sacrifice of a daughter, it would be at the more towards the end,
because you've got Samson there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of other things between chapter 11 and the end of the book.
Yeah.
But anyways, well, so moving on.
Right.
All right. So we have the vow itself. Now the response. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you have she finds out. She comes out of the tent, and he tears his clothes, and he's really upset by this. He's accusatory about this, mm-hmm. and so she receives it. What seems very calmly, and then goes out for 2 months to, quote, weep for her virginity,
right.
with her friends. And so, go ahead.
Well, so like we've said, there
mm-hmm.
are many people on both sides
mm-hmm.
who say, well, it had to have meant this because of this. And this whole weeping the virginity part mm-hmm. is a really big part, because some say the reason why, and you can speak into this, she wanted to weep her virginity for 2 months was because she knew she was going to live out the rest of her days as a virgin at the temple. But then
that's my position.
That's your position.
About your position.
Yeah, well, my position looks at the exact same picture and says, well, if that's the case, then why did she need 2 months to weep her virginity? She was going to get to weep it the rest of her life. She had her whole life to weep her virginity. So why did she need that 2 months to do it, unless she knew at the end of the 2 months the life was going to end? And so there are a lot of people who make that point as well. When I say people, I mean like theologians and scholars, not like
smart people,
not like random people I talk to at Target.
So, my response to that and my thoughts on this is both in her response as well as at the conclusion of the situation, when it just vaguely says, and Jephthah did what he vowed to do. Mm-hmm. In the very last line, I think literally it translates, and she did not know a man. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say that she was killed. It doesn't use that language at all. It doesn't say she went to sleep. Doesn't even use a euphemism. And when she goes to weep her virginity, she's about to enter into some sort of temple service in which she's functionally going to be a servant of others. And so what I see this as is, I want 2 months to do this, right, with a little bit more autonomy with these people that I'm with now, because I'm going to be taken from them more or less. And it doesn't say she's weeping her life. At no point is that even brought up. The whole thing is surrounding her virginity. And so I think the idea of her not knowing a man, I'm probably most convinced by this exchange that the focal point is she's not going to get married, not that she's about to be killed. And at the very end, when it says he did it, it doesn't mention her being dead. It just mentioned, and she didn't get to have sex. She never knew a man. So that would be this side of the aisle.
Well,
any other thoughts?
Yeah, well, what's really interesting is the whole, and he did what he said, and mm-hmm. she never knew a man. There are so many commentaries, and I think even my husband Tyler's Bible at the end has a little comment at the end that doesn't give any other possibility than when it says he did what he said he was going to do, is that he offered her up in burnt offering. So it's really interesting how many people don't offer this other picture of, well, she wanted this 2 months to like live it up before she went to go.
I wouldn't call weeping living it up.
Well, to have some autonomy, as you said.
But this idea you're about to be a servant for the rest of your life in the temple.
But for those who look at that, the argument is the reason why she wanted to weep her virginity was because she was never going to get to experience the life that she thought that she was going to experience, which for a Hebrew girl would have been to get married and to have kids, right? And so I feel like it's I've said to you this before, it's like describing the same object from two different sides of the room. It's this, they one hand says, well, she wanted to weep her virginity because she was going to live out the rest of her days in the temple, and then others say, well, no, she wanted to weep her virginity because she knew she was dying and she was never going to live the life that she anticipated.
The author of Judges has no problem being graphic, as we come to find later and elsewhere. And so the author of Judges is interestingly vague and pulls details that I personally would expect to be there, as we see later on in the case of her being killed. There is one more thing we said we were going to mention.
Oh, Hebrews. I just need to say this last thing.
And this is okay. Say one last thing before we get there.
Women did go off and cry and lament and remember her for years.
They did. Right?
And
you think about the but you think about the uniqueness of the situation, it being a leader and him having done this to his daughter. And so the whole situation it's a lamentable situation. And it would have been more on a pedestal than other ladies in different situations because of who Jephthah was.
Yeah. See, I read that and I see the tragedy.
I mean, it's a tragedy either way.
Yeah.
But when we get to the book of Hebrews, our last thing, we get to what's known as the Hall of Faith.
Yes.
And you have these men who are just prized for all the wonderful things that they did in the power of God and by faith. And we got some not so nice guys who make lots of mistakes in this list.
Well, all of them made mistakes.
Some big ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of them
Jephthah's
judges.
Right.
Gideon's in there.
Yeah.
Samson's in there. David's in there.
Yeah.
And Jephthah.
There he is. And
so, here's what I think. Here's why I think Jephthah lands there. And one of the reasons why I don't think he actually killed his daughter is when you look at all of the people in that list, they end more or less on kind of a good note. After lots of mistakes, there's something redeeming about the end. And so David makes some massive mistakes. It's clear he's a man after God's own heart. Gideon makes some mistakes, lots of women, but then before the end he says, I shall never rule over you. Samson makes some mistakes, and then at the very, very end, which we'll get to, he has a redeeming moment. And moment. And what I see for Jephthah is for him, for his last moment to be one in which his daughter is sacrificed, it seems very uncharacteristic of the list. And so I don't think this is an argument from the text itself. This is more of a thematic thing for me, where I think the list makes more sense if Jephthah, I think he belongs more easily, he fits more easily into the list if his final act recorded isn't one in which he kills his own daughter.
Well, really, his final act is getting into a fight with all the Ephraimites. So I look at that, and I look at the people who are on the list, and rather than seeing they did this or they did this, I see Christ, who is perfect, and I see how good God is, that even when we do things, and it's all disgusting, right? It's like, I haven't done the stuff that's on that list, but I've done other things, right? And yet God would still credit my faith. So I look at that list and I think, wow, even David was known for this, even though he did these other things. Abraham's on here, even though he did this. And so I look at it less about the character of the people and more of the amazing love of God for his people, and that he would give us Jesus who can make messes like the ones we see on that list.
But each person in that list was a person of faith in some sense.
In some sense, yeah, and I'm not saying that there was no faith
Right.
that we saw in Jephthah. We do see him do some things, when he goes to the king of the Ammonites and recounts the ways that God had provided for the people of Israel. I think we do see these glimpses.
I encourage you, if you haven't, to actually go and read that in Hebrews 11.
Over 12.
12.
Just read. It's good.
It's in
all
Hebrews.
good.
And take that look, wrestle with it
It is
a little
11.
bit, because it's an interesting list of people, and you read the actual stories, and you're like, you know what? I have more in common with them than I want to
Yeah.
admit, which means that I can have more in common with the kind of redemption, right, that Jesus offers, and the bits and glimpses of redemption that we see in their life afforded by the grace of God and by nothing that they could actually offer themselves.
Yeah.
So those are two different positions on
Yeah.
Jephthah and his daughter. Hope you found that interesting. Any closing comments?
I just love that God's word is good. I
Good.
keep coming back to, I may not know what this actually looked like, but I know this. I know God's word is good, and I know God is good. And so.
And we hope that drives you to study it yourself,
Yep.
and to have some good conversations along the way. Thank you for joining us.